Hey everybody, welcome into a live Patriots Q&A edition of the Patriots Beat. Week before the draft, 9 days exactly before the draft, Alex, and we are to the point now where I think I've heard every single mock draft, every single simulation of the first round, all the different variables. I think the Patriots have taken every position besides maybe an interior offensive lineman and like a punter or a kicker in the mock drafts that I have seen. I've seen wide receivers, I've seen quarterbacks, I've seen defensive players, tackles, certainly, just everywhere and anywhere that you could possibly think of right now that the Patriots roster doesn't look as bad as it did a few months ago, certainly after their big free agency, but not necessarily a roster that is rid of holes or needs for infusion of talent in certain spots. So I think that we know absolutely nothing about the Patriots' intentions right now going into this draft. And that's what Mike Giardi of NFL Network tweeted about 20 minutes ago, saying teams around the league pretty much have no idea what the Patriots have in store for the draft next weekend.
And I think some of it is you can project ahead, right? A big reason the Patriots are in the spot they're in is, and I wrote about this last week on 985thesportshub.com under, I just wrote about kind of the Patriots draft needs. But the overall concept to me is that famous Belichick mantra of you move on from a player a year too early rather than a year too late. And part of that isn't just moving on from the player, but it's having the next guy set. It's being able to move on from that player a year too early versus a year too late. And a part of the way they've been able to do that is through the draft. Now, with some of these less than stellar drafts the last few years, they've gotten behind the eight ball at some positions. They kind of restocked in free agency, but now they're in a great spot where, is cornerback as it sits today here on April 20th an immediate need? No, but both of those guys are on one-year contracts. So you're in a position where cornerback, tackles another position like that, inside linebacker, where they might not be immediate needs, but they're crucial positions. There's good players at those positions they're going to be able to get. So you have to consider those needs because, again, if the Patriots want some sustained success here and to make the most out of his free agency class, look, quarterback's a need for this year right now. We know that. Beyond that, they're in a good position to start setting themselves up for needs down the road and making sure they continue to be competitive and continue to have a full roster here for the next 3, 4, 5 years.
Right, exactly. This is more of a draft that does feel like plugging in holes for the 2022 roster and beyond, right? And that's why I think a lot of these mock drafts, there's not a whole lot of positions right now on this Patriots roster that you look at. And we had this talk off the air about quarterback. Yeah, could a rookie quarterback like a Justin Fields come in and push Cam Newton immediately? Certainly, but I don't think Bill Belichick is going to be one of those guys that's going to start a rookie right away in week one. So basically, there's not a whole lot of positions or a lot of holes on this team where you could draft a player in the first round and assume that guy is going to get starter level snaps in year one. There's a lot of player positions instead, looking at 2022 and beyond, tackle, cornerback, quarterback, certainly, that you can kind of check these boxes now and get these guys in the building now. And then when Trent Brown and Isaiah Wynn decide to move on, let's say, or if they decide to move on from Stephon Gilmore or JC Jackson, they have JC Horn in the waiting in the wings, so to speak, for the.
And you can say the same thing at tackle too with Isaiah Wynn and Trent Brown and Christian Darrisaw.
Right, exactly. So those are sort of the situations and the permutations I think that we have talked about a whole lot on this show. We're going to get to some of your questions. So if you have questions, I see a couple coming in already. Please drop those in the chat right now, and we will get to as many as we can in the next hour or so. Alex, there was, I don't know if you saw the tweet about a rumored picture from a decision maker that the Patriots and the Packers have discussed a trade for Jordan Love. I can tell you right now that the tweet that all of you guys are seeing that started this rumor is 100% fake. There's absolutely no truth to it whatsoever being that exact trade. But I think the question between the Patriots and potentially trading for Jordan Love is not completely out of left field, right? I mean, the Packers need to make a decision with their quarterback situation. They're in a similar spot to what the Patriots were in with Tom Brady and Jimmy Garoppolo all those years ago. So that sort of feels like a potential trade partner. But my whole thing is Jordan Love got picked 26th overall last year. The Patriots had the 23rd pick in the draft and they passed. So if they really wanted Jordan Love, we could have just done this last year and they could have drafted Jordan Love a year ago.
Yeah, now they're giving up the 15th pick for him, according to this. So I don't, I wasn't very high on Jordan Love last year. I didn't. I guess I'm still not. We haven't seen anything. He lost the backup job, didn't he? To what's the guys always in the chat talking about?
Tim Boyle or whatever.
Tim Boyle, yeah.
Yeah.
So what's if Jordan Love's in this class? Where is he? Is he QB 6, 7, 8? I mean, I think he's somewhere in that Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond range, right about. So draft one of those guys at that point. Don't give up the 15th pick to get a guy you can get with the 46th pick. That's just poor asset management. Maybe they really love Jordan Love, and if they did, I've said it, you can't pay too much for a quarterback you really like. But like you just said, it's hard to believe they really like him when they essentially passed on him last year. So I think that we're into the depths of silly season here, and I don't waste your time with this one.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And again, I can tell you that the picture that's floating around there is 100% not a real.
I couldn't even read it. Maybe I just got like a bad version of it, but it looked too blurry to me to make out anything.
Yeah, so I think the biggest things with Jordan Love, I would have him as QB6 in this year's draft if he were to come out this season. And what you saw last year on watching him and studying him was somebody that certainly has a lot of raw ability that you really, really like, but he was an absolute turnover machine in college. He had something like double-digit interceptions every single year of his collegiate career as a starter. I think he had 19, maybe it was, his last year in college. So this was somebody that was very, very turnover worthy, prone. Right? Somebody that really turned the ball over a whole lot. Now, he does have great arm talent. He is an athletic guy. He has sort of that Patrick Mahomes type of style to him where he can throw the ball and flick the wrist from any platform and get it 60 yards down the field. And there are certainly a lot of things that, like a lot of prospects, you can cut up 5, 6, 7 throws from Jordan Love last year and stack it against a lot of quarterbacks in every class and be like, this guy can make all the high level throws compared to other people, right? So that's something that I think you can say is attractive about Jordan Love is the playmaking and certainly the athletic upside. But in terms of decision-making, ball security, some of the other boxes that the Patriots look to check year in and year out at that spot, he doesn't really fit that mold of what they would typically look for in a QB. And at this point, I mean, if you're going to have to trade 15, even if it's a swap, if it's 15 and for 29 and Jordan Love, I mean, why waste your time, right? Just go draft Kellen Mond, just go draft Davis Mills. Those guys are pretty much the same exact thing, I would say, at this point from Jordan Love, besides maybe Jordan Love has a little bit more arm talent than those two guys, but I don't think it's a huge separation between those two types of prospects.
And it's the only difference would be the 5th-year option.
Right.
But even if you pick that up, it's a 4-year deal because a year is already burned on that contract versus the 4 years for Mond or Trask. So I can't see any. Again, the only reason I could see is if they really, really liked him, and all the evidence tells us they don't. So
yeah. At least not in that first round value. Now, if they could swap a 3rd or a 4th round pick for Jordan Love, then maybe we're having a different conversation. But if anything,
the Packers. And the Packers aren't going to trade somebody they just used a 1st-round pick on. I don't think this is a Josh Rosen situation where they're going to just sell him for a monumental loss a year after taking him. I don't think that happens.
You might have better odds of an Aaron Rodgers, not here in New England, but Aaron Rodgers moving in a year from now from Green Bay than you might have of Jordan Love moving at this present time right now. All right, let's get to this next question about Josh McDaniels. I definitely want to ignore the stuff about Tebow because let's hope that it doesn't go down any road like that. But Josh McDaniels' involvement in this decision-making process here with the quarterback. We know he was at Alabama. Now, Mac Jones wasn't the only guy that worked at Alabama, right? You had the receivers, you had Najee Harris, right. But he was at Alabama to watch Mac Jones. He was at Justin Fields as a showcase last week, the throwing session alongside Dave Ziegler. So obviously Josh McDaniels' voice is being heard at the table at the quarterback position. I guess the question that we can spin it as is how important is his voice and how much should he have in terms of say of who they draft moving forward here?
Well, if the kind of belief is true that he's going to be the next head coach and this is going to be his team in whatever it is, 3 to 5 years, I think he should have a huge say. This is his quarterback. He's definitely a part of it, right? Because there was that story from, I forget if it was Christopher Price or Jim McBride. It was one of the Globe guys that Kellen Mond has been texting with Josh McDaniels. Like they've been talking since the Senior Bowl. So if he's doing that, I think he's very involved. And I think we know that he likes Mond. It doesn't mean Mond's his favorite. He might be texting other guys, and those guys just, the story's not out there. But yeah, it sounds like McDaniels is very involved. In regards to the Tebow thing, I will touch on that, and I get that hesitation, and it's certainly valid. I'm not going to dissuade anyone from feeling that way. I just don't think there's a Tim Tebow in this draft. Well, there's a Tim Tebow in this draft, but he doesn't have the same hype train. It's Ian Book. But
or Sam Ellinger. Both of those guys are kind of, I'd say Sam Ellinger plays more like Tim Tebow, right? Like an athlete playing quarterback.
Yeah, I think part of Ian Book's more like him because they're both terrible quarterbacks. But I think that the draw with Tebow wasn't the football skill. It was the leadership. It was that Josh McDaniels thought he was getting a core, like a captain. He thought he was going to get a guy who's going to come in and be a 10, 15-year captain, and the football skills would be enough to justify it. That's what I think that pick was. And that guy, I'm not saying none of these quarterbacks have leadership abilities, but the guys who are the best leaders in this draft are also the best quarterbacks, right? Whether it's Mac Jones, whether it's Justin Fields, like these guys can command a locker room, but they also don't have the throwing motion of a pitcher in the middle of Tommy John surgery. So I'm not too worried about the Tebow thing because I don't think in this specific case it's an issue. Like look, if they take if they take Sam Ellinger or Ian Book in the third round, you can bring this clip back up and call me an idiot. That's fine. I just don't see it in this draft.
Right. And I think the question really was more also geared towards the fact that Josh McDaniels has in the past been kind of gravitated towards mobile quarterbacks outside of Tom Brady, of course, right? There's guys that he is typically favored, at least rumored wise, favored mobile QBs like a Tim Tebow, like a Lamar Jackson. Josh McDaniels was apparently, although Baker Mayfield's not Lamar Jackson, he can move around a little bit. And the Patriots apparently really liked Baker Mayfield in that draft. So does that really matter? I mean, I guess maybe in terms of the Mac Jones conversation, it could matter a little bit. But so many of these quarterbacks, from Fields to Lance to Mond, these guys are mobile. A lot of these guys are mobile. So I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a number one sort of argument of Josh McDaniels needs a mobile quarterback. But if he does want a mobile quarterback, there's plenty of them in this draft to pick from on all from the first 3 or 4 rounds of the draft. Some of those guys I just mentioned, you could go and get, if you really are infatuated with having a guy that can run, you can get Jamie Newman in the 4th round, right? There's plenty of options here for mobile QBs if he wants to go that direction. Should the Patriots go that direction? It's certainly where the league is going. At least players, quarterbacks that can create outside of structure or on what's called second reaction plays. That's the big thing nowadays, is when the scheme breaks down and you're not running the offense with the timing and stuff like that, and everything kind of goes to crap. What can the quarterback do then to create a play? Can he move around? Can he work the pocket like a Tom Brady? Can he move around like a Patrick Mahomes? What's his card to throw when everything isn't perfect, right? And that's a big sort of thing about quarterbacks as we scout them this year. And it's becoming a more and more popular kind of buzz topic of, okay, Mac Jones is one of those QBs that kind of needs that timing rhythm-based offense and needs everything to work on schedule for him to thrive. Whereas somebody like a Justin Fields or a Trey Lance can maybe create out of structure a little bit easier than Mac Jones because of their athleticism and their arm talent. That's a very popular kind of conversation around the league. But at the same time, I think offensive coordinators or play callers like Kyle Shanahan, like Josh McDaniels, are really confident in their structure and within their scheme that they're not so concerned about the 10% of the time when the play breaks down, what's going to happen, right? They're concerned about the 90% of the time. What's the quarterback doing? What decisions is he making within the confines of the offense? I think that's way more important at the end of the day. Accuracy, decision-making from the pocket is going to trump all that second reaction type of stuff, I think, for an offensive coordinator like Josh McDaniels. As appealing as playing 11 on 11 in the running game is. I still think that that's at the end of the day the most important thing when we're talking about quarterbacks. Let's talk about some wide receivers. Favorite day 2 wide receiver. We've had this conversation a few times in mock drafts and stuff like that. I'm a big Amari Rodgers guy. You know that. I think that he's a great fit here in New England. I see some other names in the chat. Elijah Moore, I think he's a day 1 guy. Terrace Marshall from LSU. Who do you like on day 2, though? And then I can maybe give a name other than Amari Rodgers since I've talked about him so much.
Is Kadarius Toney a day 2 guy, or are we putting him
I think he's a fringe,
round?
I think he's certainly going to be, I think he's one of the 32 best players in this draft. It's just a matter of how many wide receivers are really going to go in the first round.
All right, so I'll say like Kadarius Toney with an asterisk, and then I'm still aboard the Jalen Darden train. I don't necessarily know that he's going to be a good NFL player. I just love the potential. I love what's potentially there, and that's what day 2 is all about, right? It's about taking big swings on guys and getting a guy that, maybe has some red flags that kept him out of the first round, but definitely has something in him that you think, says superstar. So I think that's Jalen Darden. So I'll go Kadarius Toney and Jalen Darden because I guess I have a type.
Well, it's pretty easy to pick the undersized slot receivers in this draft, right? I mean, that's basically what 90% of the draft is. Yeah. The other name.
I was going to say, here's an interesting question. Well, give me your name, and then there's an interesting question in regards to this conversation.
Okay, so the other name I wanted to mention that I don't think that gets nearly talked about enough in this wide receiver class is Amon-Ra St. Brown from USC. So he's the type of player to me that thrives in New England, not necessarily the athlete that Kadarius Toney is or Rondale Moore is or even Jalen Darden, but he's just a technician, and he's very, very quick at the top of the route. That translated to his 3-cone time. I think he ran like a 6.81 and the 3-cone, and you see that quickness in his route breaks, the technical kind of savvy, the ability to set up defensive backs, understanding of leverage. I think he's the type of player that reminds me a little bit of Jacoby Myers, but with a better athletic profile. And if I'm the Patriots, those are the types of guys that I'm targeting at the wide receiver position. I'm saying no to Terrace Marshall. I'm saying no to Diami Brown. I like those guys as prospects for other teams, but I want the guy that is going to be ready to go within the confines of this system. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown would run really savvy routes instantly for the Patriots and would give you what Jacoby Myers does, but maybe with a little bit more athletic upside. So that's the other guy I think it's not, we really haven't talked about him at all. And I don't think he gets talked about at all in terms of, the conversation here in New England or in the Boston area enough.
Fair enough. I just think and you kind of hit on, I think he's a little redundant to Jacoby Myers. And I
think he's an upgrade over Jacoby Myers, which is kind of why I would, like to see them take him.
I don't know that I'm using a top 50 pick on just upgrading Myers,
I think especially when there's probably be more in the 2nd or 3rd round conversation, not necessarily the top 50, just because of the depth at wide receiver.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Their 2nd round pick is 46 and then it's 96. So maybe they trade up, but especially when you have Nelson Aguilar is going to be one receiver, you're really going to have only 2 receivers on the field most of the time. You already have both Jacoby Myers and Kendrick Bourne who can play that role. And I like the player. I think everything you said about the player is true. Again, in terms of roster construction, asset management, I don't, maybe if they hadn't signed Kendrick Bourne, I'd be more excited about it. I just feel like now,
I just worry about, so if they will go out and they draft a Kadarius Toney or they draft a Rondale Moore, those guys have game breaking speed that kind of works in any system, right? You just get the ball in their hands and watch them run with it. That's great, all well and good. But if their type is to be a little bit bigger and to get a guy that's a little bit more physical, I don't want to see another Terrace Marshall here. I really do.
And I agree. I agree. Terrace Marshall, Nico Collins. But I've also said, it doesn't have to be one or the other. I'm fine if they don't take a receiver until day 3. Yeah. I don't think it's that big of a need right now, just given the way their roster is structured.
I agree.
So, if they're going to go that route, the big guy, I've said this, Jonathan Adams, if you're really going to take a swing, really take a swing at like 180. But if we are going to talk about the slot receivers, somebody brought up Rondale Moore versus Kadarius Toney.
Yeah.
Which I think is a very interesting conversation. And I would say it goes back to something I just said, that I think the hesitation with Rondale Moore is his ability to stay on the field, right? And he struggled to stay healthy. And that's where the reason why Kadarius Toney is a 1st-round pick right now, or at least a borderline 1st-round pick, Rondale Moore is kind of seen a little bit later, is Rondale Moore is that prototypical day 2 pick. There's flashes of superstar there, but there's a red flag. In this case, it's injuries that's kind of holding him back. Where Kadarius Toney, he's been more durable. He's also just built a little more like an NFL player. He's thicker. He has more muscle on him. He's going to absorb hits. I also just think he's a little bit better of a player. It's marginal, but when you factor in that injury history and the physical build, I'm going to go with Kadarius Toney in this one. But Kadarius Toney at the end of the first versus Rondale Moore early, middle of the second, you can get into the value conversation there for sure.
I have major concerns about Rondale Moore. I don't think he's going to stay healthy.
But are they talent related?
None of them are talent related.
Okay, fair enough. I agree.
But he's played 7 games in the last 2 years. He's not a big guy. He's not a thickly built human being like a Kadarius Toney or an Amari Rodgers or these smaller slot types. You look at a guy like Tyreek Hill, the reason why he's been so durable is because his lower body is stout. He's built like a truck down in the thighs.
Who is that? Who was the Bucs running back? They had it like 5-6 years ago who was built and he had they call him the muscle hamster.
Martin.
Doug Martin?
Doug Martin, yeah.
Doug Martin, like the muscle hamster. Like you're looking for that kind of build when a guy's that like small.
Exactly. And you worry. I just worry about durability with Rondale Moore. He's electric. He's a lightning in a bottle. He is all sorts of kind of game-breaking speed, all those types of things. I'm not taking Rondale Moore in the top 50 because I don't think Rondale Moore is going to stay healthy. And you're projecting that he's going to stay healthy for 16 plus games and be a consistent weapon for you while touching the ball a bunch, right? If you're taking him in the top 50, you want to feed him, right? You want him to be a vocal point of your offense, and he's going to have to touch the football 8, 9, 10 times and be able to take the hit every single time and get back up. Right. And I just don't know if he will. And so that for those reasons, I've been extremely concerned and kind of wary of Rondale Moore in New England. I also think it's a little bit of, in recent years, the Patriots, especially with skill position players, have struggled to keep those guys healthy, right? They've drafted Sony Michel, they've drafted N'Keal Harry, and these guys have struggled.
Really goes back to Malcolm Mitchell.
Right. And you worry, they just haven't had the best of luck with that type of stuff in New England. Right. From Isaiah Wynn to Sony Michel to N'Keal Harry. I mean, we can go all the way down the line and years back, right? Derek Rivers gets hurt his first year. Tony Garcia never plays for the Patriots, right?
Ras Dowling is where this is all leading to.
Yeah, Ras Dowling.
Let me ask you a question.
Aaron Dobson's career basically derailed by injuries.
I'm curious what you think of this, though. So now that they have the unlimited, right, they're keeping the unlimited return from IR that they had last year. Are you more, and you have the expanded roster as well, are you more willing to take a shot on an injury-prone guy? Like, I've been thinking about that. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it because at the end of the day, even if he, you can bring him back and forth as much as you want. If he's not on the roster, he's not helping you. But I don't know. I'm curious about that. I wonder if teams will be more interested, because it applies to other guys in this draft. Landon Dickerson is one who is a clear first-round talent, if not for his injury history. If teams will be more willing to take these guys with the shorter IR and making it easier for guys to return from IR.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think that with the Patriots, like we've said, they don't necessarily need the guy to play right away. They don't necessarily need Rondale Moore to be a star for them instantly, right? But at the same time, I don't know. If you're going to take Rondale Moore, to me, I want him on outside the top 50. Like trade back in the second round, maybe trade up from the third round pick.
It'd be a Malcolm Mitchell situation.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And I think he's going to go way higher than that, especially in a draft like this where there's a lot of sort of uncertainty. There's not a whole lot of prospects in the draft. I think the Patriots board's going to be tiny. Like, I think they're going to have maybe 50, 60 draftable grades. They usually have around 80 or 90. Now we're in a draft that's a third of the size of a normal draft. I think they're going to be somewhere around 65 guys that are draftable to them. And maybe Rondale Moore is on that list. I also wanted to quickly talk about Elijah Moore, the other Moore, real fast. So a lot of people in the chat saying Elijah Moore is not going to be a day one pick. Elijah Moore, she's not a day one pick. There's a lot of conversations around the league of Rondale Moore actually being the fourth guy off the board at the wide receiver position after the big three at the top. And I think that he is going to be somebody that is going to get drafted a lot higher than certain people think. And the reason being is that he had insane production last year as that undersized slot, 3-level burner, great with the ball in his hands, great at the catch point, at the break point. There's a lot of reasons to like Elijah Moore a whole lot, and I think the league is extremely high on him as a player.
Sure, yeah, no, I think he's a good player. I can't help but think past the Ole Piss incident, the 2019 Egg Bowl. I think, did we talk about that last week on the show?
Yeah, we did. We did.
Yeah, like
we talked about it in the mock draft when we were thinking about.
We did. That's what it was.
Yeah,
he's a really good player. It's like Marco Wilson. I can't see Marco Wilson's name and not think about him throwing the shoe. So that's, I don't know. That's where I'm at with Elijah Moore. Really good player. I think, I think a lot of it's preference, right? He could be the fourth receiver off the board, but what if the team that wants the fourth receiver wants a prototypical X, wants an outside guy, right? Then you're talking about maybe Rashad Bateman, somebody like that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's preference. I think Elijah Moore is a good player, but again, it just goes back like that 2019 Egg Bowl. I watched that live. That was just amazing football. That was such a moment. And so I will, for like, Elijah Moore could be a Hall of Famer. In my mind, he'll always be tied to the 2019 Egg Bowl.
Oh no. So
it's like Leon Lett. Like Leon Lett, great player, but everybody thinks of Leon Lett, it's the Super Bowl in the snow game in Dallas.
So let's wrap up this wide receiver conversation. You mentioned Kendrick Bourne as sort of the guy in the slot along with Jacoby Myers. I think that this is an interesting conversation of, okay, there is a million undersized, spleety slot receivers. We just talked about them for like 15 minutes, right? All the different guys that fit that mold. But the Patriots have Bourne, they have Jacoby Myers. I think Nelson Aguilar, they probably will project as somebody that is maybe an X or a Z, but I think that that's someone that they're going to want to play a little bit more on the outside. But I think that the conversation of, do they really need another inside receiver? As much as I would absolutely love having somebody that could create after the catch with the ball in their hands, how much do they really need another inside receiver? And what outside guys do we like? Because as somebody else brought up, the Patriots' history of outside receivers is not so great, right? Chad Jackson, Aaron Dobson, N'Keal Harry. It's not a great run for them with the outside guys. So which ones do you feel could fit New England and maybe feel better about actually working out here?
Yeah, well, we've talked about this, and I think there's a chance that they give both Myers and Bourne a chance to play the X. Yeah. Kind of see what those guys can do. And maybe that's the answer. You can't draft a guy, so you go and get a guy who can play in the NFL, and you try to see how he works outside. If they're going to go into it, I think you go down to day 3 and you just try to find a guy to push N'Keal in camp and then either stash him on the practice squad or trade N'Keal Harry if he's good enough. I've said, and at that point, I'm going home run. Jonathan Adams, he is a jump ball threat, a red zone threat. The way their offense is built right now, they really just need the X guy to be a red zone threat. Nico Collins certainly wouldn't be a bad option either. I'm not super into the idea of them taking a big receiver. I don't, especially if they're going to keep N'Keal, and there's been some rumors that he's going to be traded, but especially if they're going to keep him, I don't see the need to take a big outside receiver.
Yeah, so I think that the need is there for a true X. I actually really like Nico Collins. I think that he's a player that could succeed here. He has that outside speed, and he also timed really, really well in the 3-cone, so he does have some agility or lateral movement, I should call it. He's not a guy that's a jitterbug at the top of the route, but at the line of scrimmage, I did see some pretty good nuance in 2019. He didn't play in 2020 in his release package. I think his release package at this point is much better than N'Keal Harry's. I think that he's somebody that can really release at the line, build up his speed. And if you're going to be an outside guy that's going to win with possession and contested catches, you have to win at the line of scrimmage. You have to move guys off their spots, be able to blow past them at the line of scrimmage, and then open up your strides, get guys on your back, and adjust the balls in the air. That's how you win as a contested receiver. And the reason why N'Keal Harry struggled so much is because he doesn't get that movement at the line of scrimmage, and it causes him to wear coverage down the field, right? And it allows those guys to ride his hip pocket and be in good position to play the ball. So I think the biggest thing what you see with Nico Collins is I do see that lateral movement at the line in his release package to get off of press coverage, to get himself up the field. And we definitely saw that at Michigan. We saw it at the Senior Bowl where he played really well. I think his value is going to be decent in this draft because these slot receivers are going to fly off the board. I think that 8, 9, 10 of these guys could go in the top 75 picks or so. So you might see somebody like a Nico Collins hang around to the third round. And if that's going to end up being the case, and I really like that value play, I like Diami Brown from North Carolina a whole lot too as an outside X. He's a little bit stiffer. I'm not sure if that really is the best translatable skill there. But Nico Collins, if I had to take somebody with a premium pick, would probably be my guy in this draft for the Patriots. If you got to wait on it, like you said, Jonathan Adams, there's a couple of bigger guys.
I'll give you one more too. And I've been big on this guy, Des Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
From Louisville. And I don't know that he's as fluent at the line as Nico Collins is, but guys who are hands catchers, guys who can catch the ball away from their body, guys who have body control and can make acrobatic catches. Those guys tend to do pretty well here. And Des Fitzpatrick is that. He's 6'2", and he can use that entire frame. And his catch radius is really impressive. So he's maybe a guy on day 3 if they want that X. And he can play a little bit in the slot, too. He can kind of play that big slot role. So he brings some versatility as well. So maybe that's a guy they look at.
Yeah, maybe a guy like Cornell Powell, too, I think could fall into day 3 just based off of the depth. That's the thing, is that we talked about this, I think, more so in really the last 3 drafts. The receiver depth has just been absolutely insane. So it's not like, it'd be great if the Patriots drafted somebody like Kadarius Toney or Rashad Bateman or something and just got this big time playmaker at wide receiver. But you can wait on wide receiver in these drafts and get somebody later on day 3 that I think is still going to have starter level talent. That's how deep this class is this year. Somebody on day 3 in this draft might really be a fringe top 100 pick in another draft. I think there's starter level talent, draftable talent in day 3 for a lot of rounds. Like, I think you can maybe get somebody in the 5th or the 6th round that will be a starter level upside type of player. Maybe not right now, that's why he falls, but down the road, maybe you can develop him into somebody like that. And those are a few of those guys there. All right, let's have this conversation. I know you want to talk running backs, Alex, so I will let you talk about running backs. The Patriots, I've said it multiple times.
Not like that. Not that kind of need, but okay.
Yeah, I've said it. We don't have to necessarily talk about Najee Harris, but we've talked about it multiple times that the Patriots have kicked the tires on running backs this offseason in free agency. They haven't made a move at running back yet. I think that there's a running back coming. Now, I hope it's not early. I hope it's not a premium pick, but I do think there is a running back coming. Where would you say is a target that you would feel comfortable with? Because I think a first-round running back would be a disaster.
Sure, yeah. Najee Harris, like sneaky need, absolutely. I'll agree with that. Not to the first-round extent. They basically need – so they have their 2 early down backs in Sony Michel and Damian Harris. That's set.
Right.
They like to carry 2 passing game backs as well. James White comes back. That's 1. But he's going to be 30. Very few running backs produce after the age of 30, and there's really nobody behind him. J.J. Taylor's kind of in this in-between space. He's actually an early down back because he's not a great pass blocker. And that James White role, as important as it is to be able to catch the ball, you have to be able to pass block too. J.J. Taylor's more that Dion Lewis where he's a change of pace early down back. So given they don't play rookie running backs and James White's kind of right up against it, the Patriots need to look to find the next guy so he can redshirt this year. And then, just like James White took over for Shane Vereen took over for Woodhead took over for Kevin Falk, etc. So where do they find that guy? The earliest to me, you're looking right outside the top 100, and it's Demetric Felton from UCLA. They've met with him. He's a great fit. Didn't physically test well. I'm not scared off by that. I don't know how you feel. I trust what I've seen on tape. I think that was an anomaly. He had a bad day. I don't know. He ate something bad for lunch, whatever it is. I don't think they need Felton at 120. There's some other guys. We've talked about Kylan Hill, maybe going a little bit later. Jarrett Patterson from Buffalo is a guy who they could be interested in. One guy I really like, though, and I've come around on this the last couple of days, and it's interesting you mentioned Rex Burkhead, because Rex Burkhead could kind of fill both roles. He was a pass-catching back, but he was better out of traditional sets and just taking handoffs from under center than a guy like James White is. And if there's a guy like that in this draft, to me, it's Rakeem Boyd out of Arkansas, the last chance U-star. He's got a similar build, 5'11", 215. So he's big, but he's not big. He's a very powerful runner. He likes to run into contact. At his size, it might be tough at the NFL, but you like to see a guy who's not afraid to fight for extra yards. And he's a sneaky good receiver. He was used a good amount out of the backfield as a junior or 2 years ago at Arkansas. Last year, he only played 6 games and then opted out because Arkansas was just terrible. But he kind of fits that Rex Burkhead. He can do a little bit of everything. He's going to be a power running back. He's going to be a guy you could use on the goal line. But at the same time, you can use him out of the backfield. He's a very good pass blocker. He's shown the hands are still coming, the route running still coming, but he's shown an ability that you get. He understands what he needs to do, and he seems like he can grow into it. And he can play special teams as well. He might be a UDF. I
just like him so much because he was on Last Chance U, but
that's why I know about him. Because Ronald Ollie was in the draft 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I did not want them to take.
Ollie.
Yeah, you need to finish that stuff. Although they did have Nick Coe last year. Was also on the show. He got cut. No. So look, it's a cool story. Would it be cool if they got a Last Chance U guy? Yes, in all honesty. The reality is Rakeem Boyd, I think, has a lot of what Rex Burkhead brought to the team, but because he's a power back who's 5'11", 215, it's going to scare a lot of teams off. And there's certainly growth that needs to happen there. But like you just said, right? You don't want them using a premium pick with the running back. So you're talking about developmental guys. I think Rakeem Boyd has a lot of traits that maybe aren't NFL ready yet, but excite you. And for a team that doesn't need this guy to produce right away and likes to redshirt running backs, he's kind of the perfect fit. And they can get him outside of the top 200 and maybe as a UDFA. So that's my guy.
The other guy I wanted to mention was Kenneth Gainwell from Memphis,
sure,
who I like a lot. I think that he's sort of like Austin Eckler, more so than maybe a James White, but somebody that in this draft has the most reps lining out outside the formation, as a guy that lines up
more than Felton.
Yeah, more than Felton.
Really?
He lined up outside receiver a whole lot in that Memphis offense. They are all of a sudden Memphis is like sneaky becoming running back like not necessarily like 1.0. That's Alabama. Alabama is never going to be topped as running back in terms of guys that are in first round types of talents. But Darrell Henderson, Antonio Gibson, Kenneth Gainwell is a draftable guy. Every single year out of Memphis, there seems to be at least one running back. A couple of years ago, I think the Darrell Henderson draft, they had 2 guys that were actually drafted that were both running backs. So they have a stacked kind of running back factory working on it there at Memphis. He's a pass catching running back. I think he can run a little bit in between the tackles. That's a really wide open zone based scheme at Memphis. So it's kind of hard to project those guys into more of a man power scheme like what the Patriots are going to run. But at the same time, I think that the pass catching skill is definitely there for Kenneth Gainwell. He's sort of like Demetric Felton light, right? If you don't want to use a 3rd or a 4th round pick on Demetric Felton, maybe you can get Kenneth Gainwell in like the 5th or the 6th round, someone like that. If they take a running back like Najee Harris in the 1st round, then I am going to quit.
Well, so the interesting thing here, and remember what Bill said during his press conference, right? That in some ways the 2019 tape is better than the 2020 tape. So keeping that in mind, let me give you one more name, Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
Because Chuba at one point,
year, right.
Right. Chuba at one point, he was in the, Najee Harris wasn't even in the conversation. It was Travis Etienne and Chuba Hubbard for RB1 this year. He was supposed to come out last year, and he would have been a borderline 1st round pick last year. He stays another year, struggled early. I mean, Oklahoma State just struggled as a whole, kind of. But, then he opts out, kind of like Rakeem Boyd did. He's just, I'm not having a good year. I want to get ready for the draft. But if Bill's using that 2019 tape as heavy as he's using 2020, Chuba Hubbard, who again can kind of do both. He's an early down back and a pass catching back. He's going to be higher on the Patriots board than just about any other team if they're really looking at 2019. And that he'd be a good pick. If they can get Chuba Hubbard around like that one, what are they like 177?
Yeah.
They did pretty well with that pick.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, let's answer this question. I think it's a good one. Bigger need, safety or cornerback? We've talked about both positions. Both positions are sort of 2022 and beyond type needs, right? Safety, you're looking for the next Devin McCourty type. Corner, you're talking about outside corners and how that's going to fit in with Stephon Gilmore and J.C. Jackson's contract situations. Which one's more important to you right now to fill?
So I'm going to kind of take a cop out because I don't necessarily agree with what you just said about them both being 2022 needs. I think outside corners a need right now. Who's their 3rd outside corner? Right now it's either Juwan Williams or Michael Jackson, who they traded for from Detroit last year.
Right.
I don't know. Juwan Williams has flashed a little bit. I wouldn't hate to see them bring in another guy who's the number 3 this year and then moves up. I think corner's a more immediate need, but with the Patriots defense, that deep safety is so important. And I trust them to be able to identify and go and get a corner later in the draft for UDFA. I think so. Upside pick, I think safety's a bigger need. I think you need to try to start finding the guy who's going to step in for Devin. But immediately, I think corner's a bigger need. Because with Gilmore coming off that injury and JC Jackson's kind of gone through cold slumps at times, I'd like them to have a real reliable third corner. I thought Jason McCourty was a good option. He's now taking other meetings. Juwan Williams, to me, is kind of risky. So is Michael Jackson. I'd like to see them have a younger, more high upside option maybe for that spot.
The argument that you just made is a good one. And the problem is that I think a lot of people, if they draft a corner, I think all the educated fans that watch our show and other shows that understand the needs of the team will understand if they take a corner early, right? If they take a corner at 15 or 46. But a lot of the casuals are going to freak the F out, especially if they take another corner in the second round, like a Juwan Williams type. Or they take Tyson Campbell, for example, from Georgia, who was really a carbon copy of a guy like Rosai Dowling or Juwan Williams, not as big as Juwan, but 6'2", long, fluid, athletic, raw upside corner, right? So I think the guys that I would look at, if they're going to go, I agree that corner is a bigger need right now than safety. I think that they do need some depth there on the outside, and I certainly think that they need to look at 2022 and beyond as well, because the odds of having both Stephon Gilmore and JC Jackson on the 2022 roster, I think, is a pretty big long shot, right? The likelihood
that's the other thing. This can change. I mean, Gilmore gets traded, it changes like that. So
and the likelihood that they're able to keep both of those guys beyond 2022, especially with the money that they just committed to to the roster this offseason, that's a lot of big contracts to start stacking. Even if you have a rookie quarterback, it's a lot of big contracts to start stacking together and fit under the cap and have flexibility. So I think the biggest thing that you would look at it with corners is somebody that can play play the Z receiver, right? Play somebody that can play a little inside, can play a little bit outside, and isn't just pigeonholed to just outside boundary corner work, because I do think there are a lot of guys that I would like at that outside cornerback spot, but somebody like an Eric Stokes, I think is someone that can move around a little bit and be sort of a more versatile player in your defense. I do like Tay Gowan a little bit from UCF as well, as sort of a slot outside type of guy. Players like that kind of fit that Malcolm Butler mold of somebody that can run around and shadow a Z receiver. I think that's an important one, because Steph, JC Jackson, you're going to keep those guys on the boundary for the most part, unless Gilmore is traveling inside with a stud, right? If he's going inside with Stephon Diggs or something like that. So I think that's where they should probably look at corner, as someone that's not necessarily the big body type. I think they have enough of those types of guys, but someone that's a little bit more flexible to move them around. But at the same time, I love the corners at the top of the draft. JC Horn and Patrick Surtain, I think if you get both of those guys in the first round, you've done really well.
Yeah, I just think I'm fine if they go out and get a bigger pure outside guy just for the long-term projection.
Sure.
And maybe it's a guy because JC Jackson, right, he started as an inside corner and then moved outside. He just kind of played where there were opportunities, and Stokes can do that. Another guy you described who kind of fits that mold is Benjamin St. Juste, who is going to go a little later in the draft and is maybe a little more of a project, but the same general idea. I just want a guy. Look, if he can play in the slot and he plays in the slot early and they figure out a way to keep both Gilmore and JC for 2021, cool. That's fine. I want a guy who, when one of those guys isn't on the team in 2022, we don't have to panic, because this guy is stepping in as outside corner number 2, and we know that he's there and he's good to go. The versatility, to me, long-term, isn't a huge issue, because I think you're drafting this guy, like you said, to be that outside corner, to be that guy that stays on the boundary and battles with X receivers and Z receivers. And to me, I really like Eric Stokes. The more I kind of read about him, the more I watch him, the more I learn about him. I said it during the mock draft. I kind of have him right there, neck and neck with Asante Samuel Jr., especially if we're talking specifically for the Patriots, in terms of the fit for the Patriots. Like, Eric Stokes is maybe the biggest riser on my board right now. I'm really a fan of his.
Yeah, he's a really, really technically quiet corner. I love quiet corners, right? When you watch guys, if they don't panic in man coverage, especially if they're cool, calm, and collected, that really translates very well to the NFL. The guys that get panicky, the guys that are opening their hips early to try to run with guys because they're worried about speed, those are the corners that tend to be a little bit grabby, tend to be a little bit prone to being burned at the NFL level. A guy like Eric Stokes is a quiet, cool, calm technician that played 3 years of starter ball in the SEC for Georgia, right? There's something to be said for that experience as well. So if you're looking for a guy to be that third corner, now they have Jonathan Jones, they have options in the slot, right? So they're not going to need him.
Jonathan Jones, Miles Bryant. Like, I'm not. Remember, D'Angelo Ross comes back next year.
Yeah, we're forgetting the guy that they just saw. Jalen Mills is
Jalen Mills. Right. Well, he's going to play some safety too, but
yeah.
I couldn't be less worried. Slot corner, I think, is one of, if not their strongest spot right now on the roster in terms of top-end talent and depth. That's why if the guy needs to play in the slot early to get reps, so be it. I just go get me a guy who can play on the outside, who can step in for J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore. That's what I'm looking at.
Stokes is a good option. I would much rather him than some of these other names that we've floated. I think that he's really quickly becoming that guy that's, not in the top three with Farley and Surtain and Horn, certainly, but that next wave of cornerback prospect, I think that he's right at the top of the list for the Patriots. If I have to name a safety, though, Tyree Gillespie from Missouri, I've really gotten into his tape more recently. You know me, prisoner of the moment. He is somebody that is really intriguing to me as a deep safety, can play single high, can come down and kind of lay the boom both against the run and the pass. Broke up a few plays against Alabama, had his best tape probably last year against Alabama, and a core special teamer that contributed on 5 different units in Missouri. And if they're going to draft a safety with a premium pick, that guy's got to contribute in the kicking game. Same with the cornerback spot, right? They got to get a guy that's going to be able to cover kicks, because that's going to be difficult for them to get, playing time as a rookie, certainly with J.C. Jackson and Stephon Gilmore, similarly with Duggar and Mills and McCourty at safety. It's going to be a little bit difficult to find a guy that's going to be able to play right away. So I think that that's a really good option for them too, maybe 3rd or 4th round. Tyree Gillespie, really high on him as well. Okay, so let's Jalen Mills really quickly. He's not going to be a single high safety. Jalen Mills is playing in the box. Yeah. He's playing in the slot, not a deep safety unless they're going to run some split coverage. Think Patrick Chung. That's really more the role that they're looking for with him. Okay, let's try to get to some more of these quarterback ones before we sign off here. This is an interesting question because we have sort of nixed some of the quarterback options ahead of the Patriots in this draft as we've gotten closer. We know the top 3 teams are going to take a quarterback. I still don't think the Atlanta Falcons are going quarterback in this draft. I think there might be a year too soon to take a guy at 4 overall, with Matt Ryan still under contract for a couple more years. But the teams behind the Patriots, the Bears, the Washington football team, those are teams that might get aggressive at the quarterback spot and might be willing to give up multiple first rounders into the future to go and jump up above the Patriots to take a QB. How worried are you about those teams sort of lurking behind New England in that 16 to 24 range? I think is where the football team and the Bears kind of are.
Yeah, it's certainly worth thinking about. It's certainly worth talking about. It's not an invalid concern. I just wonder, well, first of all, one of these teams is going to convince themselves they're going to fall in love with Kyle Trask. I think Kyle Trask ends up sneaking into the back end of the first round.
Oh, God.
I actually do. I think it's the Steelers are the team I kind of have from right now. I just think you get a seamless transition.
He's kind of Mason Rudolph-y, right?
Right. And I think you get a seamless transition from Ben into Trask, right? If that's kind of your, because Ben's got to be on his last year, I think, right?
Yeah. So he probably should have retired after last year, to be honest.
You're right, but you want to give up $40 million in terms of moving up. And this is why the Sam Darnold trade was so big. Is the Patriots have the best offer on the table because they can offer that 15th pick instead of 18 or 20 or 21 or whatever it is. And that's all they have to outbid. And that might even discourage teams from attempting it, right? The team that I'm more worried about is Denver, who sits at 9 if they want to move up. I don't know that they do. Again, I think they're too early. I don't think Drew Lock's gotten a fair shake yet. I think you used the top 60 pick on him. I think you really got to do a little more and see what he has, because he's shown some real promise, right? Outside of those last 2 minutes last year, the game in New England, he was just hitting, 50, 60-yard dots all over the field. It was great. But yeah, they might try to jump, but if the Patriots want a quarterback, they can outbid these teams. If one of these teams jumps them, it probably means the Patriots didn't want to trade up for a quarterback, which is another story. And I'm not saying that that's, the right thing to do to not trade up. But if the Patriots want to move up, they're going to if the Patriots want to move up, one of 3 things is going to happen. they're going to move up. Two things. They're either going to move up or that team just doesn't want to budge. They're not going to get outbid because they can put the best offer on the table outside of Denver, who I still think the quarterback talk is a little because they were in the Deshaun Watson thing, and I think that got people going like, oh, quarterback. Like Drew Lock's still a good young quarterback. I'm not sacrificing future assets to move on from Drew Lock. Now, if it's Deshaun Watson and the guy who's proven, yeah, I would, but I don't think they're in the space where moving up from 9 to 6, 9 to 7, and giving up a future first to move on from a 24-year-old quarterback for a guy who's a wild card, that just doesn't seem worth it to me.
Yeah, so the Bears, you mentioned Kyle Trask, and I feel like the Bears are an interesting spot for Kyle Trask because he's the type of passer that I think needs to be in a quick West Coast type of system, right? He's going to want to get the ball out. He's going to want to live
where the decisions are made for him.
Yeah, a West Coast-based scheme seems to be the best fit for Kyle Trask. So I could see the Bears liking him a little bit. He's got the size, he's got some of those things that you like in terms of a West Coast scheme. So maybe they go that direction in Chicago. The football team's an interesting one. I think that they're going to be a little bit aggressive at quarterback too. But the point I wanted to make is that, honestly, I sort of feel like the quarterback conversation is now going to come full circle. And this is where I feel like we're going to get next week on Thursday night is we tied all these conversations about Mac Jones going number 3 to San Francisco. I still don't think he's the pick for the 49ers. I know that's what everybody in the media wants to say and wants you to believe, but I still don't feel like Mac Jones is the pick for the Niners at 3, which makes me think that the most likely outcome, like we talked about you and I, Alex, starting back in January for the Patriots in the first round is probably Mac Jones. Right. I think that he's the guy that is at around 10, 11. That's when it starts to make sense for a player like Mac Jones. Maybe 3, a little bit too high, especially over guys like Justin Fields and Trey Lance. Mac Jones, I feel like we are, like I said, we started in January around the college football playoff and around the college football national championship saying Mac Jones is the best fit in the draft for the Patriots at quarterback. Then we all kind of got fascinated, myself included, by Justin Fields, by Trey Lance, by the upside of those players. And now I feel like we've come full circle and Mac Jones is the more realistic option to get. So I feel like Mac Jones is going to be right in their sweet spot and somebody that is going to be very, very easy for the Patriots to end up getting. I think that it's going to end up being Fields or Lance at 3 to San Francisco. I don't think any of these other teams are going to be clamoring to draft Mac Jones in the top 10 that have picks like Denver or like Atlanta that might have needs there at quarterback. I think that it ends up being somebody like Mac Jones, which I find is will be fascinating if we come back complete full circle after you and I talked about it all the way back when.
After I talked about it in October, you told me no.
Yes, I still remember that. I know you were going to bring that up.
Oh, you're never going to forget it. As long as I have anything to say about it, you're never going to forget it. No, why do you want Mac Jones? Why do you want Mac?
I'm still not 100%
third round quarterback.
It is a little bit of a reach, but that's quarterbacks for you. All right. So apparently, getting off quarterbacks really quickly, I want to go back to my big offensive lineman. I haven't seen this from Doug and Mike Reese, but apparently Elijah Vera Tucker's name has come up in their conversations. He is somebody that definitely checks a lot of Patriots boxes. Very smooth athlete. Does project from a lot of people to move inside to guard. But when you play that well at tackle in a Power 5 conference, I think you can definitely leave him out at tackle as well and have him have a very good NFL career. Really smooth athlete, connects really well and climbs to the second level, pull blocks, movements, lateral movements if you want to move him there. Very clean pass setter. Just a kind of clean, checks the boxes, safe offensive line pick. And I think that would be a really nice pick for them in the first round. We've talked a lot about Darrisaw. We've talked a little bit about Rashawn Slater. We've talked about guys maybe on day 2 at the tackle position, Radunes, Liam Eichenberg from Notre Dame, whatever. We haven't talked a ton about Vera Tucker. I'm not sure how much you've seen of him, Alex, but a very technically sound, clean tackle prospect with very good athleticism.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I haven't watched a ton of him. They like those athletic kind of multi-position tackles. He certainly fits. I think if they're going to take a tackle, I just feel like they're going to be able to get Darrisaw Slater at 15. And I think those two guys are better. And maybe this is like a trade back snare. I'd have to see exactly what Doug and Mike said. But
right.
He's a good tackle. I just don't know if he's going to be the best tackle on the board when they pick.
The reason why I think that he could be higher on their board than we think is because they do love those guys that can play both tackle and guard, right? If you give them that versatility, I think Vera Tucker is somebody that they could project in their system could play 4 different spots, every spot besides center, right? And that is something that they do hold some value.
There's guys you can get like that later in the draft, right?
Right. I mean, that's not his top trait. I'm just saying that if you're stacking him together and he's got some really good upside, really clean technique, as I said, if you're stacking them together, Darrisaw, Slater, Vera Tucker, all these Leatherwood, all these guys in the first round, Vera Tucker definitely presents the most kind of versatility, somebody that can move around the line and you can play in different spots. Whereas those other guys, if you drafted a guy like Darrisaw, he's playing left tackle. If you draft a guy like Rashawn Slater, he's playing left tackle. I think Vera Tucker gives you a little bit more versatility. Now, I do wonder if he's a little bit better of a fit in a zone-based scheme, big outside zone type of offense, like a Shanahan or a McVay type of offense, where you can step out and turn and run towards the sideline and use that athleticism in space as a lateral mover. But he does connect well at the second level, like I mentioned, not necessarily a people mover at the line of scrimmage, but if they want sort of an athlete, which they have tended to go towards, those guys that are really have good feet, like Isaiah Wynn, Vera Tucker at left tackle makes a little bit of sense for them as well.
I just think I'll go back to what I said about the corners. Positional versatility is nice, but they're going to need a starting left or right tackle next year. They do. And
I think I want tackle. The reason why he's projected mostly inside the guard is because his skill set is a little bit better in terms of upside at guard, right? That's what we're talking about a lot of these guys, right? You bump him inside the guard, he's an all-pro guard. He's probably like a second-team all-pro tackle, right? You know what I mean? Like,
right. So again, where's they're set at guard. They're good at guard. They need they're going to need a tackle next year, and just get me the guy who week 1, 2022 is going to be the better starting tackle. And I just think that's Darrisaw and Slater.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we can wrap it up there. And okay, well, we did not have Mac Jones as a 3rd round pick. That was back in October that we were talking about Mike Larry. Reading some of these comments about how we feel about Mac Jones, they're a little bit off. Anyways, I think we can wrap it up about there. And we're going to be back on Thursday, mock draft again, 5.0 this time, right, Alex? And we're going to do we're doing fun mock drafts on Thursday, right? And then another serious one on Tuesday before the draft.
Tuesday will be the final draft. This is what we're going with.
Yeah, that is the plan as of right now. We'll try to maybe fit in another Q&A or something like that, and we'll definitely have post-draft reaction. Thank God we can finally start talking about the guys that they actually took.
Then what are we going to talk about? We'll do like a week or 2 on that, and then what are we doing until July? Red Sox? I don't know.
Then the real offseason begins, right? Then the real offseason begins. That's what I always say. After the draft is the real dead period of the NFL calendar. So maybe we'll come up with some cool ideas. Patriots, roster resets or whatever, and we'll try to keep we'll definitely keep the train rolling here on Patriots Beat even after the draft, but I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about for the weeks after the draft as well, to break down all the different things that the Patriots have done on draft weekend. So again, mock draft Thursday night, another one on Tuesday before the draft, which will be sort of our final this is a dress rehearsal type of mock draft for the Patriots, our best stab.
Dress rehearsal, we're wearing suits?
We could wear suits.
I don't know if my suits still fit. I haven't worn a suit since before quarantine. we may have to do that just to see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see how we look getting all in our suits that were pre-quarantine weight suits. Exactly. Both of us are going to be a little bit tight around the neck, if you will. But we'll get into that next Tuesday. Maybe we'll wear those like suit T-shirts.
Shit, like a tuxedo T-shirt. That'd be super classy. That'd be very classy. I like that.
That'd be very classy. But we're going to get into that on Tuesday again. That's our final mock draft leading up to the 2021 NFL draft, which we are 9 days away from, and we're we're getting closer. All this speculation, all these rumors, we can finally see what the Patriots are going to do. Because right now, I think the one thing that we can confidently say, Alex, is absolutely nobody knows what Bill Belichick is going to do next weekend. So don't listen to anyone. I don't think anyone that claims to know has any idea what they're talking about. So no one knows what the Patriots are going to do. We're going to do our best at trying to take a guess at it over the next couple of episodes with the mock draft. But thank you guys very much for coming in today and asking questions, excuse me. And Alex and I will be back on the podcast on Thursday night for mock draft 5.0. Yeah, 5.0.
That's right, yeah.
But until then, signing off, Alex Barth, I'm Evan Lazar. Thanks for watching, everybody.